Okay. So the example looks like this. If maybe S0 is greater than S1, well, we know how to deal with this, right? We simply kind of swap them, and instead of using greater than, we can use less than. The example that I want to give you is this one. And here, of course, we have the F body, and here we have the else body. So this one is actually more difficult, a lot more, not a lot, but I would say it's more difficult than having just greater than or less than. It's not super difficult. We're gonna, of course, we have to have an else here. We're gonna have to do the example together. Okay, so the problem, as maybe you would expect, is this equal sign. This equal sign is a problem because we cannot get rid of it. Maybe we'd like to get rid of it, but we cannot get rid of it. And the reason why we would like to get rid of it is because we do not have set less than or equal to. We just have set less than. So if you were to say, for example, I want to treat this as if S1 is less than or equal S0, which is, of course, it's true. I mean, this one is the same thing as this one. That's not going to help you because you still don't have this equal. All right. So Anthony is coming up with a very good suggestion. And the suggestion, how about we treat these two, or rather, how about we treat this one as something that looks like this? If S1 is less than, or rather, yeah, I guess we can do that. S1 is less than S0, or S1 is equal to S0. So let's split this condition into less than or equal, because that's really what it is. Less than or equal is less than or equal. And we can say, we can write the condition right now. Is that what, Anthony, you're proposing? Something like that, right? Yeah. Now, of course, if you want to convert that to MIPS, then you would have to have maybe multiple branch conditions. But maybe that's okay. Maybe that's not the end of the world. And I'm going to actually do that. I'm going to do that with you because I like this suggestion. Okay. So let's see. Now, who wants to try this one? Now, let me go back here and say something. In the previous examples, we decided to use the branch to go to the else. So we said, instead of, we can check for this condition, but instead of going to the if body, we can just go to the else body. That's really that. And we said, and that's why we said if it's equal to 0, as opposed to if it's not equal to 0, or if it's equal to 1. Of course, making it equal to 1 is going to be a problem because we don't have a register that contains 1. So it's, if you want to make sure, if you want to check if it's equal to 1, you just simply say if it's not equal to 0. But we didn't do that. We just said if it's equal to 0, let's go to the else. Otherwise, we go sequentially. The problem with this particular one is that it's not super easy to determine when it's false. So for this to be, because this is an or, well, it's easy, but it's kind of takes more time. Because this is an or, this one has to be false and this one has to be false, both of them, for us to go to the else. So it's really, there's two things here. It's actually easier to go to the F body, because if this one is the case, you can go to the F body. If this one's the case, you can go to the F body. So you can actually split them. It'll be easier to split them if you want to go to the F body. So what we can do potentially is we can say set less than S1. Actually, let me put it in T0. S1, S0. And then you can say branch on not equal. And then you can say T0, 0. I want to go to the F. And of course, we're going to have to put the F somewhere. But let's not worry about where we're going to put the F. Let's make sure that this logic makes sense. So here I'm saying check if S0 is less than S1, which is, excuse me, check if S1 is less than S0, which is really what you're seeing here. And we're saying if this is true, then we're going to have a 1 here. And here I'm saying if it's not equal to 0, in other words, if it's 1, then I'm going to go to the F. So this is actually good, because if this is the case, we're going to go to the F. But there's another condition, which is this one. So of course, if this condition is not satisfied, that means S1 is not less than S0. And if that's the case, we go sequentially. So maybe when we go sequentially, we can make this check. So we can say, branch on equal if S0 or S1 is equal to S0, then go to the F. Let's have the F here. So this condition is actually going to check for this one. And this condition is going to check for this one. And in either one of them, we're going to go to the F. Now, of course, if this condition is false, we're going to go sequentially. We're going to check for the second one. And if this one is false, again, meaning that this one is not equal to this one, then we go sequentially. So this portion here that we get to sequentially, that must be the else. So that must be the else. Because this is false and this is false. So we go sequentially, we get to the else. And that's when you would go to the else, when this is false and this is false, because this is an or statement, an or condition, a condition that has an or. Do you have any questions about this? So of course, when we get to the else, we want to make sure that we skip the F, just like when we've been going to the F here, we've been kind of skipping the else. Same thing is going to happen here. So we're going to have an after, and we're going to say, we can, after we finish the else, so this would be kind of the else body. And then we say jump to after. And here we can have the F body. Okay. Um, so it seems that there is a suggestion. It's not quite right. It's not quite correct yet. But it's close to something that maybe we should talk about. So this answer is correct, but it's not the best answer. There is actually a simpler answer. And maybe that's really what the student is kind of alluding to. So let me uh, tell you what the best answer is, what the better answer is. And I'm going to start with actually what we started with, which is this one. And I'm going to have another text box here. Okay. So this is the condition that's going to take us to the F body. Can someone tell me what the condition is that's going to take us to the else body? Of course, we're going to go to the else body when this is false. But what does that mean? Can you articulate that? So if S0 is greater than or equal to S1, we're going to go to the F. Else, we're going to go, otherwise, we're going to go to the else. So Anthony's saying we're going to go to the else when S1 is greater than S0. And this is actually correct. So when you have this condition, which is S0 is greater than or equal to S1, the opposite of that condition is going to be S1 greater than S0. So again, you can think of numbers here. Let's say we have, from 0 to 100. And let's say, S0 is 5, S1. Let's actually do some examples here. Let's say S0 is 5, and let's say S1 is, for example, 4. Now, in this case, of course, this one's going to be true. But when would it be false? It would be false when S0 is less than. So let's go kind of down. So let's go one number at a time. So let's do 6 here. Okay, this one's going to be true. Let's make it 5. Oh, this one's still going to be true because 5 is greater than or equal to 4. Let's make this one 4. Oh, this one's going to still be true because 4 is greater than or equal to 4. Now, as soon as you go below this one, 3, then this one's going to become false. So what Anthony proposed is really correct. And this is something that you studied or you're studying right now in discrete math, which is, it's discrete math. I think it's called discrete math in College of Charleston. So essentially the negation of this one, let's say S0 is greater than or equal to S1, the negation of the line above is S0 is less than S1. That's really the negation of it. And there is this thing that's called double negation. And that's if you negate a statement twice, you're going to end up with the same thing, with the same logical expression. So for example, if you have this logical expression A, this one is the same as kind of negating A twice. Like that. So let me show you where I'm going with this double negation thing. So if you take this one, I can tell you that this one is the same as negating it twice. It's the same thing. This is a correct statement. This one is the same thing as negating it twice. Any statement is the same thing as negating it twice. And what you could do is you could take this negation and you can essentially kind of add it to this, essentially remove the parentheses and distribute this negation. Essentially, you want to take this logical expression and you want to do what we said we would do. So we know that the negation of this one is that. So I'm going to take this negation And I'm going to take that and I'm going to replace the negation of this one, so this highlighted section, with S0 is less than S1. Is that good? So this one, let me write it and then I'll pause and see if you have any questions. This one is the same thing as, again, I'm going to remove the negation here and I'm going to make this less than. Let me pause here for a few seconds and see if you have any questions. All right. So I don't see any questions. So essentially what that means is I can replace this with that. And the advantage of doing so is that right now I have something less than. I removed the equal sign. And that might make things, it will make things slightly better. So if I put this here, essentially what would happen is we can compare, or we can check if S0 is less than S1. And we can say, if this one's going to be equal to 1, essentially it's going to be true that S0 is less than S1. When I say when this one is equal to 1, I hope that you know I meant when T0 is equal to 1 in the set less than. So let me do set less than T0, S0, S1. So if this one is true, if it's true that S0 is less than S1, then there's going to be 1 here in T0. And when there's a 1 here, when this is true, then the whole thing is going to be false. So what that essentially means is when this is true, I'm going to go to the else. Because when this is true, this whole thing is going to be false, and I'm going to go to the else. So now I can say branch on equal if T0, or rather, let me say branch on not equal if T0 is equal to 0. So again, this means if T0 is equal to 1, because it's going to be either 0 or 1. And here I'm saying if it's not equal to 0, which means that it's 1, I'm going to go to the else. And of course, there's an else here. There's the else body. And there's going to be an if here. And there's going to be an if body. And of course, there's going to be a jump to after. So if we didn't have this negation, we simply say, let's do the set less than, and then we say if it's equal to 0, let's go to the else, because if it's 0, that means it's false. I want to go to the else. However, we do have this negation because this statement that's highlighted is the same thing as this, which is what we started with, this. So you can't just remove the negation. I mean, that doesn't make sense. If you want to remove the negation, that means you're going to swap the if body with the else body, and that's one way to do it. But I think it's better if you just, instead of swapping the if with the else, you just convert this one to this one and say if this one is equal, if this is true, then the whole thing is false, and that's when you want to go to the else. So when you say set less than S0, S1, again, you're going to say if it's not equal to 0, in other words, if it's equal to 1, in other words, if this is true, which means this is false, and that's when you want to go to the else, because of course we go to the else when the condition is false. Okay, so Grace, that's a good point. This if is not needed. you're right. This if you wouldn't want to have it, because if this condition is false, we go sequentially. All right. Do you have any questions about this? All right. So to kind of summarize, and I do have a slide that summarizes what we did. I'm going to actually open the slides in a minute, but to summarize, if you have something that looks like this, you typically say, let's say branch not equal. Let's list all of them. Here, typically you say branch not equal is 0, S1, and you go to the else. If there's an else, of course, if there's no else, you can just go to after. If you see something like this, S0 is not equal to S1, then here you would say branch on equal, and you say if they're equal, I want to go to the else or the after. Now, if you see if S0 is less than S1, then you can say set less than, you can put the result in T0, you can say S0, S1, and here you can say, then, can I do this? Then you can say branch on equal if T0 is equal to 0, which means that if S0 is not less than S1, then you can just simply go to else or after. If you see something that looks like this, S0 is greater than S1, then you simply swap and you make it S1 is less than S0. So you make it like this. Let me put that like this. And of course, when you have this, it really looks like this. Of course, right now here we have S1 less than instead of S0 less than, but that's okay. You can just swap these two. Now, if you have something that looks like S0 is greater than or equal to S1, you want to think of it as you make it not, or rather if not, and then you negate all of this. So you essentially do double negation. Let me kind of shrink this one. Let me, or rather expand this one and say you make it like that at the beginning, and then you make it if and then you write the condition for this one. So this one's going to be branch set less than. Let's also use T0, S0, S1. And instead of saying branch on equal when T0 is equal to 0, I want to go to the else, you say branch on not equal, because you want to go to the else when T0 is equal to 1. Because you want to go to the else because this condition is true. This condition is true. And that's because when this condition is true, this condition is going to be false. And of course, when the whole condition is false, we go to the else. So the last one, if we have something like S0 is less than or equal to S1, this will be very similar. You make it if, let's do double negation first. This actually would not be needed. Let's do that. Yeah, so we can say if double negation S0 is less than or equal to S1. So I'm not doing anything here. I'm just, we don't need this. I just have double negation. and then you make it if, let's have the outer negation, and let's replace this with the negated version of it, which is S0 is greater than S1. And then you can just simply swap the S0 with S1 similar to what we did here. It's perfectly fine. When someone says S0 is greater than S1, you can say, okay, that means S1 is less than S0. I mean, it's the same thing. You can read it from left to right or right to left, and it'll be correct. So this one, you make it if S1 is less than S0. And right now, what you have is something very similar to this one. So you can just simply say set less than T0, S1 is 0, and branch not equal T0, 0, go to else or after. All right, do you have any questions about this? All right, so let me copy paste a question by a student. So let me paste it here. So let's say this is what we have. We swap the operator, so it becomes S1 is less than S0. We say set less than, if S1 is less than S0, you put 1 in T0, otherwise you put a 0. And here you would say, if this one's equal to 0, which means that this condition is false, you go to else. Yeah, this is correct. This is correct. All right, any other questions? All right, so if you don't have any other questions, let me actually look at the slides before we move to a new topic, which is loops. All right, so I'm going to post the slides after I post the recordings of today. Let me make this my font. Okay. So of course we talked about how this operation works. If this one is less than this one, we're going to jump to L1. We also have branch on not equal, which of course we talked about. And here we introduce jump, which we are very familiar with right now. And jump, it's called unconditional branch because we're going to branch regardless. So there's no condition. Here's an example, just like what I showed you here. When you have something that looks like this, the best way to do it would be to say branch not equal. You can actually make it work with a branch on equal, but it'll be one more line if you don't have an else. So for this condition, for this situation, it's better if you say branch or not equal. So it's better if you, again, try to look for the condition that's gonna be the opposite of the if body. So yeah. So in this case, you would say branch or not equal. If S3 is not equal to S4, I want to go to the exit, essentially after the loop. And that's after the loop. Otherwise, you go sequentially, and that's what you do. And that's the correct syntax. So we did that. I encourage you to look at it once I post the slides, make sure all of that makes sense. That's another example, very similar. So what's happening here is just simply we have two lines. So you still want to do branch on not equal and go to after or exit. But between that branch and the exit, there's two lines. So that's how it would look like. Of course, we may have an else, and with the else, we've done that. We've done many examples. I start with a solution that has a problem, and the problem here is that we're not skipping the else when we go to the if body, and then I tell you that this is the wrong answer, and then I tell you that, well, here typically I ask you, what do you think the correct answer is? And some student would propose that we skip the else by jumping. All right. Then we talk about set less than, which we've done. I don't think we need to review this right now. You should make sure that you understand this. Now, if you have an inequality, you want to do set less than, and then after that, you want to use branch on equal or branch on not equal, depending on kind of this. So here we say, let's check for S0 less than S1. And here we say if it's equal to 0, meaning that if the condition is false, you want to go to the else. So this is a full example. You can look at it again, home. We've done all of this. So this shouldn't be new. And here's a question that you can think about, home. The answer is actually going to be on the next slide. So I'm going to skip all of that and think about it and make sure that you compare your answer with the correct answer and make sure that this makes sense and that you understand why we have that correct answer if your answer was not really that one. Okay, so here's a summary, and this is really the summary that I just added here. My summary here is even more thorough. Let's see what else. Yeah, this is, then here we talk about the not, all of that. We talk about the not here. And all of that are things that we talked about. So I really don't think that I should be repeating all of that. Yeah. I'd like to change the font here. Okay. Do you guys have any questions before I stop recording and start a new one? Okay, it doesn't seem that you have questions. Let me stop recording and start a new one.